Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time I wrapped up the Sheridan biography and asked the Patreon members who they wanted me to cover next. The answer came, the most famous creole of the American Civil War, and possibly American history in general, Pierre Gustav Toutant Beauregard. If you'd like to vote for the next general to be covered in a biography series, join the Patreon page for as little as $1 and you can cast your ballot. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. Pierre Gustav Toutant Beauregard fought in the two major theaters of the Civil War, commanded troops at First Manassas, oversaw the firing on Fort Sumter, for a limited time commanded the Army of the Mississippi, later named the Army of Tennessee, and defended Richmond in the last full year of the war. His prominence through the war results in people knowing his name, if not his importance, and he continues to be a unique character in Civil War historiography. Beauregard was born on May 28, 1818, to Jacques and Helene Toutant Beauregard, both of significant European ancestry, with a solid foundation in Louisiana. He was born and raised on the family plantation Contreras in St. Bernard Parish, south of New Orleans. The plantation consisted of a large one-story house and fields of sugarcane as its cash crop. As a baby, he was nursed by a Dominican slave woman, and he played with the slave children until those children were sent to work for his father around the plantation. Beauregard's first language was French, the language spoke on the plantation. His father sent him to a private school in New Orleans at the age of 8, where all the classes were conducted in French. He appears to have been quite studious and reserved, nearly opposite of what he would become later on. An anecdote about Beauregard's early life emerged. It was said at the age of 9 a man teased him in front of his friends and family, so Beauregard picked up a stick and chased the man into an outhouse and prevented him from coming out until the man apologized. As one of his biographers explained, the outhouse story may have real meaning. He would always resent an affront and demand redress, but he seldom forgave. At the age of 11, Beauregard's father sent him to a school in New York City known as the French School, operated by two brothers who had served under Napoleon Bonaparte. At the school, Beauregard worked hard to make good grades and learned to speak and write the English language fluently, but he most enjoyed hearing the stories of the brothers about the great commander Napoleon. He began to read books about him and adopt him as his hero, attempting to model himself after the former Emperor of France. Beauregard also wanted to enter the same profession, the military. He pleaded with his family to allow him to enter West Point Military Academy, but they protested, and the stubborn young man refused to budge on his objective. Finally, the family gave in and used their political connections to obtain him an appointment to West Point. Upon entering the academy, he began to Americanize himself. His last name was hyphenated, Toutant Beauregard. He got rid of the hyphen, most likely to avoid ridicule from classmates. Within a few years, he would drop the Pierre from his name and sign his name P.G.T. Beauregard. Even at West Point, he was a reserved student and driven academically. Those who knew him at the academy seldom got to really know him because he stayed to himself. It may be because he stayed to himself that he didn't accrue many demerits, since he didn't get up to mischief. His first year there, he only got 3 demerits, and his third year, he got none. A story came out of his time at the Point that he courted General Winfield Scott's daughter, Virginia, and they were engaged to be married, but her family thought they were too young. However, the story is suspect and can't be confirmed. In 1838, Beauregard graduated second in his class out of 45 cadets. Among the classmates he bested were Irvin McDowell, William Hardy, Carter Stevenson, Edward Johnson, and Andrew Jackson Smith. Beauregard was close with his artillery instructor Robert Anderson, and after graduating, Beauregard served as Anderson's assistant for a short time. His first assignment was to Fort Adams near Newport, Rhode Island in the Engineer Corps. Officers liked being assigned there because of the vibrant social life in the old resort town and the prestige of working on the fort's construction. Beauregard found the environment difficult on his health. He had a chronic throat ailment through his first winter and by the next year suffered from inflamed kidneys. The latter ailment confined him to his bed for 2 months. By the fall of 1839, Beauregard was headed to Pensacola, Florida to construct coastal defenses and to hopefully improve his health, as doctors advised. After staying in Florida for a couple of months, he got a new assignment to produce topographical and hydrographical surveys of the Gulf stationed in Louisiana. This was a wonderful assignment for Beauregard, who remained at that duty station for almost the entirety of the next 5 years. He was close to home, so he visited friends and family, and he became acquainted with a young woman at a nearby plantation. Her name was Marie Villeray. Beauregard quickly began to court her, and they were married in September 1841. Their first child was a boy they named René, and their second child was a boy they named Henry. The family stayed at Marie's father's plantation for a while, but Beauregard eventually moved them to New Orleans. In August 1844, Beauregard got an assignment to Fort McHenry in Maryland. He remained there for about 5 months before coming back to Louisiana. Amid his moves, word spread throughout the country of a possible war between the United States and Mexico. That would mean an expansion of the military, and Beauregard hoped to capitalize on such an increase and gain a promotion. Knowing the Engineer Corps would be less likely to see promotion, Beauregard petitioned his superiors to be transferred to the artillery if the opportunity arose. Months ticked by as Beauregard awaited an eruption in hostilities between the two nations. When it did, the lieutenant anxiously awaited his reassignment. In late November 1846, Beauregard finally got his wish, although he wouldn't be leaving the Engineer Corps. The port city of Tampico had been captured and it needed fortified. Beauregard moved to the town and became one of the principal engineers in constructing the earthworks guarding the town. When his superiors came to inspect his work, they wrote glowingly of his abilities. They also notified him that he would take part in the next major offensive, General Winfield Scott's invasion of Mexico. For this invasion, Scott assembled an engineer company/staff that consisted of Beauregard, Isaac Stevens, Robert E. Lee, John G. Foster, and George McClellan, as well as others. Scott's invasion began at Veracruz, where U.S. forces landed and began a siege of the port town. It was Beauregard and the other engineer officers' job to help construct battery emplacements and earthworks around Veracruz. At night, many of the engineers, to guard against fleas and sandflies, wood ticks, and other insects, took the salt pork issued to them and covered themselves in grease, then slept in a canvas bag drawn up all the way to their neck. Beauregard worked long hours to set up artillery emplacements. One day, when his superior asked him to place artillery on ground selected by the superior, Beauregard brought the artillery to the location, then climbed a tree to get a better lay of the land. He determined the ground to be too far forward and isolated to place the artillery. He reported back to his supervisor that he advised against placing the artillery at that location and recommended another. The superior, perturbed by Beauregard's unwillingness to place the artillery where directed, told the lieutenant that he had examined the ground himself. Beauregard shot back, "But you haven't examined it from the top of a tree." The superior said he hadn't, and went the next day to look over the location. He agreed with Beauregard's assessment, but as one of Beauregard's biographers put it, he here showed a characteristic that would embroil him in many needless quarrels, a tendency to question the will of a superior, and to put the superior in his place with a smart remark. One afternoon, Beauregard and Lee went out on a reconnaissance toward the city and returned after dark. As they got closer to their lines, a soldier yelled out, "Who goes there?" Lee yelled back, "Friends," and Beauregard said, "Officers," but before they could completely identify themselves, the man shot, singeing the uniform of Lee. Beauregard and Lee subdued the soldier and turned him in at camp. After a bombardment, the siege of Veracruz came to an end, and the garrison surrendered to U.S. forces. Colonel Joseph Toutant, the engineer's direct superior, wrote glowingly of his engineers, but Beauregard felt that he wasn't given enough credit. He claimed that 3 of the 5 battery emplacements that brought Veracruz to surrender were placed by him. Right after the siege ended, Beauregard was struck by a fever and diarrhea that confined him to his bed for several days. Soon the American army would move out from Veracruz, destined for Mexico City, the capital.